Good morning, everyone. My name is Stella Yangzee Sherpa, and I'm a clinical psychologist as well as a UGC-NET JRF awardee. Today, we will begin our lecture class on Introduction to Psychological Testing. This lecture will give you a foundational understanding of what psychological testing is, why it is such an essential part of psychology. First, we shall look at the concept and definition of psychological test. Then we shall move on to or will explore the different uses of these tests in different contexts, followed by their key characteristics. After that, we'll move on to a different type of psychological test. Okay. Finally, we will discuss an important methodological aspect, that is scales of measurement. By the end of this lecture class, I am sure we will have a clear understanding of the fundamentals of psychological testing and how this concept form the backbone of assessment in psychology. Let's begin with the definition, shall we? According to American Psychological Association, a psychological test is a standardized instrument that is used to measure individuals' behavior, cognitive ability, personality traits, attitudes, and other psychological constructs. It involves a systemic process of administration, scoring, and interpretation, which allows us to compare individuals' performance with already established norms. Let's repeat the definition again. A psychological test is a standardized instrument used to measure an individual's behavior, cognitive ability, personality traits, attitudes, and other psychological constructs. It involves systemic process of administration, scoring, and interpretation, allowing comparison with already established norms. Now, let's not just memorize the definition, let's break it down for a better understanding. Okay, so the first is standardized instrument. What does standardized instrument mean? What does standardized mean? It means that a test is administered. Okay, the test is administered and scored in the same way for everyone. Why is it important? Because if different people get different instruction or the examiner interprets the responses differently, the test result won't be fair or reliable. So that is why standardization or standardized instrument is important. The next is systemic process of administration and scoring. This means that the test has clear step-by-step instruction for how it should be, how the responses are, how the instructions are supposed to be given, how the responses are supposed to be recorded, and how the scores are to be calculated. Without systemic scoring, one examiner might give a different score than another. So that is systemic process of administration and scoring. Okay, now comes to interpretation. A test doesn't just give you the raw score. The responses are interpreted scientifically. This helps us understand what the score actually means about a person's ability, trait, or behavior. Next comes the norms. Norms are basically the benchmark, the data collected from a large group of people. They help us know whether an individual score is average, above average, or below average as compared to others. Now that we have defined psychological test, let's pause and ask a very practical question. Why are these tests important? Why not just rely on observation, intuition, or experience? Let's go through this, okay? Psychological tests are important because they reduce guesswork. They reduce guesswork. Two, Imagine you are a clinical psychologist. You are trying to understand if your client has depression. If you rely solely on your casual observation, you may miss symptoms or even overestimate their severity. In other words, test replaces hunches with measurable evidences. Point 2 is they provide objective, reliable, and valid information. Without these qualities, test results would be meaningless and misleading. Point 3 is they help improve decision making. Psychological tests guide important decisions across multiple fields. Let's say clinical setting, educational setting, organizational setting, forensic, etc. Now that we know what a psychological test is, let's move on to the different uses of psychological tests. Psychological testing is not just limited to clinical setting. It is applied across various fields. Let's go through each one of them one by one. The first is very common, clinical purpose. Psychological tests are widely used by clinical psychologists or psychiatrists. They even psychiatric social workers. They help in diagnosing mental health conditions, severity of symptoms, and track patient improvement and plan suitable interventions and therapies. Now, coming to the next use of psychological tests is in educational purpose. It's an education purpose. In schools and universities, psychological tests play a vital role. Tests can be help diagnose or help identify learning disabilities like dysgraphia, dyslexia, also other neurodevelopment conditions like ADHD, autism, as well as recognize gifted students, evaluate their academic achievement, and even predict their future performances. So this is educational setting. Aptitude and interest tests basically guide students in choosing a career that suits them. Coming to the next use of psychological tests is in occupational organization. Organizations often use psychological tests for recruitment and development. They help select the right candidate for a job. The tests are used to assess employees based on their performance, such as not only just performance, but also leadership qualities, teamwork skills. Okay. Next comes the use of psychological tests in research. Psychological tests are essential in research. They help measure abstract concepts and like motivation, stress, intelligence, and empathy, or even let's say high-risk sexual behavior. The test basically provides reliable and valid data uh, that the researcher can use to test hypotheses and even compare the groups. So the next use of psychological tests is basically in forensic purpose or forensic field. Why do we use it in forensics? In forensic psychology, psychological tests play a key role in the legal system. They help evaluate whether a person is competent to stand trial. They can also assess criminal responsibility or the risk of reoffending. Psychologists may even provide testimony based on test results. Coming on to the last use of psychological tests, in its used to understand ourselves. It is for self-understanding. Psychological tests are not only for professionals, but they are also used for personal development. They help individuals understand their personality traits, their strengths, and weaknesses. Is this all clear? I hope you understand what I've taught you. Coming to the next very important topic of psychological tests is the characteristics of psychological tests. It is very important to know what a good test, what are the characteristics of a good test. Okay, and to be a good test, there are particular characteristics that they need to have. Okay, let's go through each one of them one by one. The first important characteristics of a good test A good psychological test is reliability. Reliability refers to the consistency of test score. If a test is reliable, it gives similar results under consistent condition. For example, if a person takes an IQ test today and they score, let's say, 115, okay, and then take the test again after 2 weeks under similar conditions and they score 116, then we say that the test is fairly stable and reliable. Okay, next is validity. What is validity? Validity tells us whether a test is actually measuring what it's supposed to measure. For example, if a personality test is supposed to measure personality and it is measuring, let's say, intelligence or academic knowledge, then the test is said to be not valid. Okay, coming to the next important characteristics is standardization. We've already read this previously. Standardization means that the test is administered and scored in the same way for everyone. This ensures, most important thing is fairness and comparability. For example, in let's say in a intelligence test like Wechsler's adult intelligence scale, there are strict instruction about how the questions are supposed to be asked and how the answers or responses are supposed to be scored. Next comes an important characteristic, that is norms. Norms are the average scores of the representative population. They help us compare an individual score to a large group. For example, if a student scores 100 and let's say 115, okay, on an IQ test, we can say they are slightly above average, and the norm for average is below 100. Okay, norms allow us to interpret the test result in a meaningful context. Okay, coming to the next characteristics, very important characteristic, that is objectivity, means that the test results are not influenced by examiner bias, personal judgment, and expectations. For example, in a multiple choice question, in a let's say an aptitude test, scoring is objective because whether there is only one correct answer. Objectivity ensures that the results reflect the person's true performance and not the examiner's assumption. Coming to the next, the last important characteristic is practicality. Practicality refers to how easy, efficient, and cost effective a test is in the real world. For example, a test that takes 3 hours require expensive equipment and highly trained experts uh, may not be very practical because it requires 3 hours, it requires expensive equipment, and it requires highly trained experts, which is not suitable in a school setting. On the other hand, a short screening tool like general health questionnaire will be quite applicable and practical in that moment, or in that it will be feasible in that environment. Okay, practicality ensures that a test can be used effectively in the field. Okay, now we'll move on to a very important topic. Let's explore the different types of psychological tests. Psychological tests can be classified in many ways. Some of them are, the first one is based on modes of administration. How do we administer it? To whom do we administer it? Is it an individual test or is it a group test? Individual test, okay, is administered to one person at a time, allowing for close observation and interaction. So this is under mode of administration, it is individual test, okay, and it is assigned to only one individual. Can we see the picture here? It is assigned to this assessment, whatever they are doing is only for one individual or one participant. Okay, we can take an example of, let's say, if let's say that in this picture the child is being assessed on intelligence, okay, where the examiner works directly with the participant. Okay, next is group test. Let's look at the picture on the right. See, people are taking a test in a group. So In a group test, the test is administered to many individuals simultaneously, usually in large groups or in a large classroom. Okay. For example, an Army Alpha test during the World War I was used to assess large group of soldiers. So this is group test. Coming to the next one is before going to the next topic, I want to also share some differences. Okay, how do we remember individual tests? Basically, individual tests gives richer details and are time consuming, while uh, whereas group tests are more efficient and it's not time consuming. Okay. Second is based on criterion of scoring, whether it is objective scoring or is it a subjective scoring. Okay, based on scoring. So objective test will definitely have objective scoring. Okay, and objective scores, it is basically objective tests are basically scored with clear definite answers, little to no examiner judgment. For example, any multiple choice aptitude test, we'll take an example of any multiple choice, let's say differential aptitude test. Okay, next is subjective test, where the examiner, okay, it requires the examiner's judgment in scoring an answer, or scoring the answer or the responses that are given, and the scoring may vary. For example, any kind of essay type exam or thematic interpretation or projective assessment. Okay, the key difference between the two are objective tests are more reliable, whereas subjective tests captures the depth but may risk bias. Coming to the next type of psychological test is based on time limit in producing responses. Let's try to understand this. First is speed test. It focuses on how quickly someone can solve a simple task under strict time limits. Example, clerical speed and accuracy tests, where one must match symbols as fast as possible. Next, we have, this is the speed test under time limit of producing responses. Then we have power test. In power test, the focus is on the difficulty of question rather than the speed. They allow enough time but gradually increase in complexity. For example, advanced mathematical reason test, that is, but the key difference between the two, that is power test and speed test, is basically speed test is about quickness, power test is about how we are solving the most difficult questions. Okay, this is about problem solving ability. Now we have another type of test that is based on nature or content of item. The first is verbal test. What are verbal tests? What does verbal test means? Verbal means it's using language such as vocabulary, comprehension, or reasoning. Any verbal subtest of IQ are basically verbal test. Okay. Next, we move on to non-verbal test. Let's go to non-verbal test. Okay. In non-verbal test, it uses symbols, figures, or diagrams instead of language. For example, we can take Raven's progressive matrix. Okay. Let's see here. There's an example. It's not exactly Raven's progressive matrix, but it's an example. There are two blocks here that are empty. They want us to find the correct figure that can fit in this. Okay, let's come to the next point is, that is performance tests. Okay, performance tests require manipulation of object or completion of tasks, not just answering question. Very important example is, let's say, a block design test from Wechsler's adult intelligence test. You can see that there is this picture of a block design. Generally what they do is they give 4 or 5 blocks, 4 blocks to the participant, and they give a card, and they are supposed to replicate the design on the from the card onto the blocks. Is it clear? I hope you understand. Next point is, next type of test is basically based on purpose and objective. That is intelligence tests. We know so many intelligence Binet Kama tests. Okay, then we have Wechsler's adult intelligence test. Okay, let's move on to the next type of test is personality test. Explores the personality trait, emotional function, and behavioral tendencies. Very common is, the picture shows is uh, Minnesota multifaceted personality inventory, that is 2. Okay, this is an revised version. Coming on to the next one is neuropsychological test. Basically, it assesses brain function and detects any kind of impairment. Here we have given an example. This I do. Can you recognize this? What kind of test this is? This is Wisconsin card sorting test. Okay, Wisconsin's card sorting test. Next is aptitude test. Already the picture has been given. This is differential aptitude test. Basically, it assesses the potential to learn or acquire new skills. So generally in a aptitude test, they have multiple choice question. They ask you to calculate any missing numbers or missing figure, and they ask you what is the correct answer. You have to evaluate it through reasoning or abstract reasoning. Okay. Next is achievement test. Okay, it basically assesses knowledge or skill that is already learned. So this one is a wide range achievement test that is used to assess that learned knowledge or skill. Next, the last but not the least is projective test. We basically present an ambiguous stimuli to uncover unconscious motives or thoughts and feelings. We'll take an example. Look at the picture. What can this be? It is thematic apperception test. It's already mentioned here. Okay, it's thematic apperception test. Now, we shall move on to the next topic. It is a very important topic that is called the scales of measurement in psychological testing. When we collect any kind of data in psychology, it is basically not enough to just simply record the observation. We need to know whether the data is measured and classified. This is because the test is the type of the test or the type of measurement scale that determines what kind of statistical analysis we can use later. So basically, knowing the type of measurement scale, understand this, knowing the type of measurement scale it helps in statistical analysis later. Let's go through each one of them one by one. Okay, please pay attention so that you understand. It is a little tricky, but you'll get it. The first is nominal scale, the simplest level of measurement. Basically, it is used for categorizing data into distinct groups without implying any order or magnitude. For example, categories are basically not quantitative. It is qualitative, not numerical. For example, gender, we have male, female, and under others. Then we have religion. We have so many religions. There are categories, right? Hindu, Christian, Muslims, Jain, Buddhist. Let me take another example, maybe blood group. Okay. Think of this as naming or labeling or categorizing. There is no ranking um, provided ever. Are there any ranks when it comes to blood group? Are there any ranks that when it comes to religion? There is no ranks. The next is ordinal scale. So basically, ordinal scale, okay, the scale classifies data and ranks them in order, but the differences, they are unequal. Okay, we know which is higher or lower, but not by how much we do not know. For example, let's say in a class, someone comes first, someone comes second, someone comes similarly, someone in a running race, they come first, second, third. But uh, you know, Is the difference equal between the first, second, and third? It is not. We know who is first, who is higher, who is lower, but we do not know we definitely know that the differences are not equal. Okay, we do not know by how much the differences are. For example, I gave you an example of race. Okay, the first one finishes at, let's say, in 1 minute, the second one in 4 minutes, the third one in 5 minutes. We don't know the actual time gap between the three of them. It is calculated, but this is just an example. Okay, coming to the next important scale is interval scale. Remember, in this scale, there are equal intervals between values, which helps us compare differences. However, there is no absolute zero. Remember this. Okay, there is no ratios as well, like twice as much. We cannot say that. Okay, equal units, but no absolute zero. So let's take example of IQ. There is no absolute zero. Temperature, when it comes to Celsius or Fahrenheit, there is no absolute zero. Suppose if let's say if the IQ is 20 and someone's IQ is 40, we cannot say it is twice as much. There is no proper absolute zero. When it comes to, let's say, even temperature, if the temperature is 20 degrees and the temperature is 40, we cannot say the temperature is twice as much. Okay, let's come to ratio scale. Last, it's a very strong scale, or the highest level of measurement, which helps all the properties of all the other scales, that is interval scale, nominal scale. Okay, like it has a true 0 point. Okay, it is the highest level. There is differences, okay, proper intervals, and the ratios are meaningful. Okay, we can say that this is twice as much as this. Let's say, take an example of height or weight. Okay, we can say 20 kilos is twice 10 kilos, right? Is it clear? Okay, now finally we can sum up the scales of measurement, which is very crucial for psychological testing because they determine how the data can be analyzed and interpreted. Nominal is just labeling. Okay, let's revise it. Ordinal gives us ranking without knowing the gaps. Interval allows us to measure the differences, but there is no zero. Ratio provides the most information, that is order, equal interval, and absolute zero. In short, as we move from nominal to ratio, the level of measurement becomes more sophisticated, and our ability to apply advanced statistical analysis also increases. Now, as we come to the end of our lecture class, let's briefly reflect on what we have learned. We began with the definition and psychological testing. Then we had we understood what a psychological test is. It is not just a set of questions, but it is standardized, systemic, and is a scientific tool that allows us to measure invisible psychological traits like intelligence, personality, emotions, cognitive ability. We understood why psychological testing is important. Unlike casual observation or guesses, the tests provide objective, reliable, and valid information. They also reduce bias, improve decision making, and give psychology its scientific foundation. We also explored the uses of psychological tests, from clinical diagnosis to educational to organizational recruitment to forensic evaluation, research, and even personal growth. Tests are applied in nearly in every field, okay, and even beyond. We examined the characteristics of a good test: reliability, validity, standardization, norms, objectivity, practicality, that ensures that a test is trustworthy and meaningful. We also learned about the different types of tests based on administration, okay, based on scoring, time limits, uh, item content, okay, and basically purpose, okay, purpose or objective. Now, each test serves a very unique purpose, as we've already read. Finally, we discussed the scales of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio scale, that are the backbone of data interpretation. As we move from nominal to ratio, the sophistication increases, allowing us to perform more advanced statistical analysis and draw more meaningful, basically, conclusion. Now, since we've read all of this, we are basically going to go through some MCQ. Okay, I hope your guys are excited. The first question is, which of the following best defines a psychological test? Is it A, tool for collecting any type of data about human behavior? B, is it standardized instrument to measure psychological construct objectively? Is it a set of unstructured questions for understanding personality? Or is it D, an interview technique to assess mental state? Which one is it? It is B. Okay, it is B. It is a standardized instrument to measure psychological construct. We've already read that in our definition. Okay. Next is, the main purpose of psychological testing is to replace clinical judgment entirely? I don't think so. Is it to provide subjective impression of behavior? To quantify psychological attributes scientifically? To study only abnormal behavior? I don't think so. So what is it? Can you tell me what answer should this be? It is C, to quantify psychological attributes scientifically. It is not to have an subjective impression of behavior. Okay. Next is, which of the following is a clinical use of psychological testing? Is it diagnosing mental disorder? Is it predicting job performance? Don't think so. Evaluating teaching effectiveness? Don't think so. Is it measuring consumer preference? No. It is basically diagnosing mental disorder. The fourth question is, in organization psychology, aptitude tests are mainly used for establishing psychiatric diagnosis? No. Is it selecting and placing employees in suitable roles? Is it measuring unconscious conflicts? No. Is it analyzing social behavior in groups? Do we want to know that? No. It is selecting and placing employees in a suitable role. Okay. Everything whatever I've taught you, I've made the MCQ on those topics particularly. This will help you clear your concept. Which characteristic ensure that a test produces consistent result when administered repeatedly? Is it A, validity? Is it validity? No. Is it standardization? Is it reliability? Or is it objectivity? Let's read the question again. Characteristic that ensures a test produces consistent result. It is reliability. It is not validity. It is not standardization. It is not objectivity. Okay. Going to the next question is, a test is said to have validity if, okay, a test is said to have validity if it is lengthy and comprehensive. Okay, it measures what it intended to measure. It can be scored by different raters without disagreement, or it has a true 0 point. I don't think test lengthy and comprehensive has anything to do with validity. It can be scored by different raters. No, this is about what? Reliability. It has a true 0 point. I think they're talking about ratio scale. Validity is, it measures what it intends to measure. Correct? Next is Rorschach. The question is, Rorschach in blood test is an example of what kind of test? Is it an achievement test? Is it an aptitude test? Is it an intelligence test? Quickly. It is a projective test. It's a personality test. Okay. Next question is, which of the following is an example of a power test? Okay. We have to understand which one is a power test. Okay. Is it Wechsler's adult intelligence scale block design subtest? I don't think so. Is it a 30-item timed typing speed test? No, speed test is not power test. Is it Minnesota multifaceted personality inventory? I don't think so. Is it Raven's progressive matrices? Untimed? It is that. It is Raven's progressive matrix. Okay. Next question. Next question is, a researcher records the severity of depression using categories mild, moderate, severe. This scale is best classified as what? It is mild, moderate, and severe. So this is not categories. This has a high, low, and high, mid, and low. So it has some ranks. So it will be ordinal scale. Is it clear? Right? Because there is an order, but the interval might not be equal. The last question. Okay. A psychologist codes handedness, right-handed, left-handed. Okay. Right-handed is given 1 and left-handed is given 2, and ambidextrous, basically using both the hands, is 3. So this represents what kind of scale? Is there any rank to it? If there is no rank, so it can't be ordinal. It can't be ordinal. There is no equal interval. No. Is there any, like, absolute zero? No. It is nominal scale. Okay. The numbers are arbitrary labels, basically. There are no ranks. Okay. Now, coming to the end of this class, I hope you'll be able to understand what are the foundations or introduction to psychological testings are. Okay. Now we'll conclude this, that through the uses, through the characteristics, through the understanding of what psychological test is, it is important for us to know what tests can be used and when it can be used. Okay. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our class. Thank you.